and ends 8,000 years before Christ. During the Paleolithic period, people were nomads, meaning that they didn't live in one place. No, they were constantly on the move, in search of animals to hunt. As they were hunters and gatherers, they needed to follow the animals in order to capture them, and at the same time, they collected wild fruits they found on their way. They lived in tribes, in small groups formed by families, and they found refuge in caves where they would paint on the wall. These paintings were done with a mixture of charcoal, earth, animal fat, and water. Look, here are a few examples. The truth is, it's absolutely fascinating to think that these first paintings, these first artistic representations, were drawn thousands of years ago, don't you think? Both Paleolithic men and women wore animal skins, which they had hunted previously. And they used tools such as an axe and spears made out of stones, wood and bones, which they themselves carved. With the passing of time, or rather centuries, these first human beings became more and more intelligent, and they began to domesticate animals, such as dogs, goats, sheep and pigs. They also began to cultivate plants, which were then eaten. With the arrival of agriculture and farming, everything changed. Man stopped being a nomad and became sedentary, and the first villages were made. This is when the Paleolithic period ends and the Neolithic begins. The Neolithic started 8 million years before Christ, when we discovered agriculture and farming. And it's finished with the beginning of the Metal Ages. Men and women in the Neolithic produced food by cultivating the land and domesticating animals. We can say that they were the first farmers and agriculturalists of our history. Better yet, our prehistory. As they had to look after their crops and animals, they constructed small villages and began to settle in them permanently, meaning that they transformed into sedentary, not like the Paleolithic, who were nomads because they were moving constantly. The first Neolithic settlements were situated in very fertile lands, near rivers so they could access water easily, needed for their crops as well as allowing their animals to drink. You know how important water is in our life. The first plants that were cultivated were cereals, such as wheat, or pulses like chickpeas. But do you know which were the first animals to be domesticated? Well, it was dogs, sheep, goats, and pigs. During the Neolithic era, many interesting things were invented, such as ceramic and fabric. But the most important invention was the wheel. Everything became so easy for men and women in the Neolithic, especially when they started using metals. This is the point where the Neolithic ended and a new era in prehistory commenced. The Metal Ages, which commenced approximately 6,500 years BC and finished when the first written language was born. The first metal which was used was copper, then bronze, which is a mixture of copper and tin, and finally iron, which is a much more abundant mineral and therefore easier to find in nature. In order to mold these metals, they were melted at extremely high temperatures and transformed into the desired shape. This is how utensils like tools, weapons, and decorations were made. This process is called metallurgy. Through metallurgy, crafts and trade began. The metallurgists were the first specialized craftsmen, as the metallurgy is a very complex and difficult task which few knew how to do. The rise of agrarian production and the appearance of crafts caused bartering, that is, the exchange of products. This is when trade began. Trade, over time, made some villages grow in size, turning into cities. This then created large commercial and cultural exchange between these new cities, and new inventions such as sailboats and wagons used to transport goods were made. Trade also changed society by creating social classes, the rich and the poor, the powerful and the slaves. During the Metal Ages, people began questioning the mysteries of life, as well as death, and the first religious representations arose. Constructions called megaliths were created with large blocks of stone. Mega meaning large, and liths stone. The simplest megalith was the menhir, a large stone reverted vertically into the ground. Dolmens were also constructed, such as the ones we see in these images.
The Metal Age ended with the appearance of writing 4,000 years before Christ.
And with this, prehistory comes to an end, but history commences. Did you find learning about prehistory interesting? Paleolithic, Neolithic, and the Metal Ages? We definitely did, because by getting to know our past, we understand our present and make our future better. Mesopotamia. The word Mesopotamia means between two rivers in Greek. So this civilization was named because it's situated between two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. Within these fertile lands, the first ever city-states were born 4,000 years before Christ. The most important cities were Ur, Uruk, and Lagash. These city-states were independent from each other. They were surrounded by a great wall to protect themselves. The ziggurat, a temple where priests lived, was built in the center of the city. Here, they controlled trade, agriculture, and taxes. The supreme priest had the city's political and religious power. Agricultural fields spread across these cities, which were traversed by irrigation channels that used the river's water to water cultivations and animals would drink. Most of the city's citizens were farmers and shepherds, but there were also artisans that sold their own products at markets. Because of their well-being, both cities began to grow, but so did the conflicts between them due to the control of land. These battles arose military leaders that little by little turned into monarchs, into kings. Between the years 3000 and 1000 BC, Mesopotamian lands were conquered by various towns or cities. The first one was the Akkadian Empire, then the Babylonian Empire, followed by the Assyrian Empire, and finally the Persian Empire. So, we've got to know part of Mesopotamia's history. But do you know why it has been such an important civilization for humanity? Well, there are many reasons, but the first one is because Mesopotamia was where around 3500 BC the first written language was found. At first, it was composed by simple drawings called pictograms. Look at these examples. Over time, these drawings were simplified and started to transform into symbols, which is what we know today as cuneiform writing. As you can see, This writing was made with a wooden punch over clay boards. Another great contribution Mesopotamia made was its art. They created the ark and vault that helped them construct magnificent temples and palaces. To decorate the walls and doors within these temples and palaces, they used paintings like this one, where the king Ashurbanipal is hunting lions. By the way, before we say goodbye, do you know what country Mesopotamia is today? Well, it's Iraq. You can see it here. Egypt is a country that still exists today, situated in northeastern Africa. But what we call ancient Egypt is a civilization that started more than 5,000 years ago and lasted for approximately 3,000 years. Its origins commences with Pharaoh Name, also known as the Scorpion King, who in 3200 BC funded this country at the Nile's bank. The River Nile is the largest river in Africa and was the most important existing thing for Egyptians, since they depended on its water to survive. Their whole civilization and cities rose from the river's bank. The Nile was so important because Egypt is a country surrounded by desert, and the cultivations could only take place at its shores. But it wasn't only used for agriculture. The river was also used to fish and hunt. They also used it as a great road to transport goods or large stone blocks used for their constructions. All of this was why the Nile was considered to be a god. Actually, ancient Egyptians had hundreds of gods. Some had a human's body and an animal's head, like goddess Bastet, who had a lion's head, or god Anubis and his jackal head. But the most important of all was Ra, god of sun, who had a falcon's head. The pharaohs were ancient Egypt's kings. There were many pharaohs over 3,000 years, but the most famous one was Tutankhamun. Ancient Egyptians believed in life after death, and therefore they were buried with their belongings, furniture, vases, clothes, and even food. They believed that this way these things could be used in the next life. As pharaohs had the greatest power, they wanted to have the best tombs, and they got them. These tremendous pyramids were built for pharaohs' tombs. Inside them, there are many tunnels, chambers, and secret passageways. When they died, pharaohs and some noblemen's bodies were mummified to preserve their bodies after death. These are the famous mummies. Mummies were placed in a sarcophagus, luxurious coffins that were covered in beautiful drawings and hieroglyphics. Hieroglyphics were the mysterious Egyptian writings. Their meaning was a mystery for thousands of years, but thanks to archaeologists, we can translate them and partly understand what they want to say. The truth is, everything in ancient Egypt's circle fascinates me. You already know that discovering the past makes us understand the present and improve the future.
Today, we're going to learn about the discovery of America. In the 15th century, when the Catholic Queen Isabel and King Ferdinando reigned in Spain, Christopher Columbus, a courageous marine adventurer whose roots are believed to be Italian, got economic help from Queen Isabel to undertake a trip by sea around the Earth. At the time, everyone believed that the Earth was square and flat, except Columbus, who believed it was round, and with this trip he intended to prove it. For that, he wanted to cross the Atlantic Ocean and reach the Indies, making an almost complete loop around the world. On August 3rd, 1492, he left with 3 ships and 90 men from the port of Palos in Spain into the unknown. By the way, the 3 boats were called La Niña, La Pinta and La Santa Maria. First, they went to the Canary Islands, where they filled their ships with supplies, that is, food and water. And from there, they continued on their adventure. They spent days and days, weeks and weeks, sailing without seeing land. And after almost a month of sailing, with a desperate and tired crew, a sailor named Rodrigo de Triana shouted, "Earth in sight!" And from that moment, the world was changed. They had arrived at Guanahani Island, later named San Salvador, which was inhabited by peaceful Indians. After returning to Spain, Christopher Columbus organized 3 more trips to America, where he discovered other unknown lands such as Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Honduras, Panama. And here, he led an exchange of products and animals. From America, he took unknown foods such as potatoes, tomatoes, and chocolates to Europe. And from Europe to America, he took animals that did not exist there, like hens and horses. In 1506, the admirable Christopher Columbus died convinced that he had found a new route to reach Asia and had shown that the earth was round. But he never knew nor imagined that he had discovered a whole new continent. In homage to the great travels of Christopher Columbus, a country in South America was named after him. Do you know what it is? Well, of course, Colombia. But I'm sure you're wondering why the new continent was named America. It was in honor of Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian navigator who was the first to realize that the lands discovered by Columbus belonged to a new continent. The truth is that it is super entertaining learning about our past history. Don't you think? One of the most important events in world history, since it shifted the passage from the modern age to the contemporary age and performed the biggest political and social change that has ever been known in Europe. The French Revolution occurred at the end of the 18th century, exactly in the year 1789. At that time, King Louis XVI ruled. It was an absolute monarchy. That is, the king had all the power and could make the decisions that he wanted, without having to answer to anyone. Thanks to his power, Louis XVI and all the nobles who supported him had great wealth and great privileges. Meanwhile, the common people, the bourgeoisie, such as medical lawyers, artisans, merchants, or peasants, had to pay many taxes and lived, the vast majority, in misery. Fed up with this situation, the most disadvantaged social classes formed the National Assembly and decided to write a constitution where the rights and duties of all social classes were collected in a more just and egalitarian manner. From that moment on, violent riots began. On July 14, 1789, in Paris, the capital of France, a large mass of people went to Bastille, prison, where all those who had opposed the king were imprisoned, to free them. This assault became the symbol of the revolution. In the rest of the country, there were also many revolts and peasants rebelled violently against the nobles, looting and destroying their castles. The National Assembly took power and governed based on 3 great values: liberty, equality, and fraternity. The new governors wrote a very important document, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, antecedent of the Constitution that was approved 2 years later. The French people dethroned King Louis XVI and both he and Queen Marie Antoinette, his wife, were beheaded in the guillotine. The consequences of the French Revolution were many, but the most important thing was that it ended the inequality between social classes, that new rights were established for citizens, and that democratic ideas were spread to the rest of the countries of Europe. The truth is that knowing the past, the present is better understood, and the future is improved. Don't you think? Goodbye, friends! Until the next Happy Learning video.
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
The wheel is one of the oldest inventions of humanity, and for sure one of the most important. Contemporarily, we couldn't imagine a world without it, since it is crucial for many things. But not only for vehicles like cars or bicycles, but also, for example, for the function of a watch or a merry-go-round. The wheel was first seen on small clay tables, discovered in Mesopotamia. These tables represent a car with wheels and are more than 5,000 years old. According to archaeologists, the wheel was invented in Mesopotamia over 6,000 years ago, but we don't know who the inventor was. Supposedly, the first wheel was invented after the first human beings used cylindrical tree trunks to move heavy things. Observing this, someone very intelligent must have thought that making a wooden circle with an axis, like current wheelbarrows, it would be much easier. And from then on, the first potter's wheel and cars appeared. Crafts were the first to use the wheel, and it made it easier and faster for potters to make their pots, thanks to the potter's wheel. Here we can see how two wheels and an axis help this craftsman endlessly. Through time, the wheel was also used in transport. Animals didn't have to carry heavy weights on their backs. Now, thanks to wheels, they pulled the cars and moved a lot more weight with less effort. And from then, the wheel has been an essential partner to human beings. Look, look! The number of wheels we can see around us. The truth is, this is such a cool invention, don't you think? Goodbye, happy friends. See you in our next Happy Learning video.
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
Hello friends! Welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Today, in our section Great Inventions of History, we're going to get to know the bicycle. The bicycle is one of the most fun means of transport there is. Also, it is very ecological and very healthy, since when we ride a bicycle, we do physical exercise. But do you know who and when the bicycle was invented? No? Well, let's find out. The truth is that unlike many other inventions, the bicycle was invented in various phases, and it was various people who intervened in its evolution until reaching the bicycle we know today. Here you can see the first bicycle in history. It was invented by Carl Drace in 1817, but it doesn't look a lot like contemporary bikes. It didn't have pedals, and you had to push it with your feet on the ground. In 1861, the Frenchman Ernest Michaud, thought of putting pedals on the front wheel. But because it didn't balance correctly, people fell off, and his idea didn't succeed. But it was useful, so in 1873, James Starley, an English inventor, would manufacture a bicycle with a front wheel a lot bigger than the back one. Although the falls from so high up were dangerous, he made it easier to drive them. So in 1873, Thomas Stephen commenced the first trip around the world. He took 3 years to finish it. In 1885, John Kemp Starley, James Starley's nephew, invented a safe bicycle. Because it had brakes and was a lot lower, falls were less frequent and less dangerous. Exactly! It was more secure. He had created a contemporary bicycle. From this moment on, the bicycle became famous throughout the world. And it started to be used for circus shows, to travel, or just to do sports. But the bicycle's history hasn't ended. There are still new bikes being invented, like mountain bikes, race bikes, electric, or some which won't even move no matter how fast you pedal, like at the gym. There are a lot of curious bicycles, like all of these. It's clear that the bicycle is an invention which runs smoothly. So everyone, let's ride a bike! Goodbye, friends! See you in the next Happy Learning video. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to Happy Learning TV.
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
And welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Have a look at these images. As you can see, the first phones that were invented have nothing to do with the ones we have today. In fact, we don't call them that anymore. Now, we call them mobiles, and they have become an essential part of our lives. Today, in our series, Great Inventions That Changed History, we're going to get to know the origin and evolution of the telephone. The first telephone inventor was an Italian scientist named Antonio Meucci. In 1854, as his wife was ill and couldn't move, he invented the teletrafono, an instrument which allowed acoustic signals to be sent great distances. This way, whilst he was working on the bottom floor of his house, he could talk to his wife, who because of her illness was almost always in the top floor of the house. 6 years later, he gave a public demonstration and was able to transmit through the teletrafono the voice of an Italian singer. La, 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 la. But nobody paid him anything for his invention. As Meucci had little money, he couldn't register and protect his invention forever, and he only registered it for 3 years until 1873. In 1876, the British inventor Graham Bell took advantage of the circumstances and he registered the telephone, this time more perfected as his own invention. And as he did have a lot of money, he he registered it forever. When Meucci found out, he denounced Bell. But because he was so powerful and Meucci was poor and couldn't afford good lawyers, he always lost at court. In 1889, poor Antonio Meucci died without his great invention being recognized. Throughout the years, everyone has unfairly believed that Graham Bell was the inventor of the telephone until 2002, when justice was served and the United States and many other countries finally recognized Meucci as its creator. In the years since the 19th century, leading up to the present day, the telephone has evolved non-stop. The first telephones were fixed and had a handle to make them work. Then, discs were introduced with numbers to be able to dial. Further down the line, they changed these discs for buttons. Until the first wireless telephones were created, the first mobile phones. The one we can see here in this image is one of the first mobiles in history. One of these old mobiles, with their battery, could weigh up to 10 kilograms. The truth is, they weren't very practical, and that's why they didn't last long and began to rapidly improve. Images were introduced, first in black and white and then in colour. Then came infrared, Bluetooth, cameras, touchscreens, the internet, and then came the smartphone. The telephones of today. The telephone is an invention which has changed history and our lives. But we need to be intelligent when it comes to using them. We can't spend all day with the phone in our hands. We can't be connected to it all the time. Our body needs to go out. To do exercise, we need to see the world and nature with our own eyes and not through screens. We need to smell flowers, the countryside, the sea. We need to hug our friends and truly experience life. And telephones, mobiles and screens will never give us that. Goodbye, friends. See you in the next video.
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
Hello, friends, and welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Have you ever noticed how many books there are around us? Books of adventures, of games, animals, and riddles. There are so many, and they're so wonderful. Well, perhaps these books would have not existed if it weren't for a wonderful machine invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the 15th century. Today, in the series Great Inventions That Changed History, we are going to learn about the printer. Well, the truth is that the printing press was not created by a single person. It was something that took shape over many years and with the contribution of many creators, like all great inventions. Although it was Gutenberg who stole the limelight. Before the printing press appeared, books were written by hand and then were copied one by one. Can you imagine having to copy a whole book? As it took so long to copy them and required so much work, the books were very expensive and could only be bought by people with a lot of money. Education and culture did not reach everyone, and most people were illiterate. They could not read. The printing press is a machine that is used to make books quickly. But the first idea of something similar arose in China, in the 4th and 5th centuries. The Chinese invented xylography, which consisted of a wooden plate on which a text or drawing was carved. This plate was coated with ink and rested on silk or papyrus. Very clever, but it was very difficult to carve a whole text on wood, and moreover, few copies could be made because it would wear out very quickly. Hundreds of years later, in the 11th century, also in China, a gentleman called Bi Sheng came up with the idea that if he made the letters in clay, one by one, he could move them, exchange them, and reuse them to write different words. Another great breakthrough! But the system was still not very practical. The clay letters were easily broken, and the truth is that it was not very successful. But in the 15th century, a German goldsmith arrived and created the machine that would revolutionize the whole world. Johannes Gutenberg. He was the genius who made wooden molds of letters and filled them with lead. He made many letters and put them on a support to form the words. He fixed these supports to an old grape press, soaked them in ink, and ta-da! The printing press was born. Now, many books could be made in a short time and much more cheaply. Thanks to this ingenious invention, everyone could learn to read and society became much more educated. Of course, this machine was perfected more and more, and now books come out of much more sophisticated printers, and some don't even need to be printed like those from Happy Learning. But if it weren't for that first printing press made by Gutenberg, maybe tonight you wouldn't fall asleep reading that story you like so much. Has that ever occurred to you? Goodbye, friends. See you in the next video.
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
Welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Do you know what this is? It's the base of a machine that caused a revolution. Today in the series Great Inventions That Change History, let's get to know the steam engine. It's incredible to think that a single invention could have changed the world. Before the steam engine, everything was different. Traveling, farming, and making things depended on the strength of people, the help of animals, or the whims of the wind. And of course, everything went a lot slower. The steam engine made means of transport, such as ships or trains, faster. And so people and goods could get from one place to another a lot quicker. And also jobs that had previously been done by hand or by animal power started to be done by machines. Almost everything could be done with less effort. Factories were created, lots of factories. And cities grew and grew, and the world was transformed. All this happened between the 18th and the 19th century, and it is called the Industrial Revolution. It was very, very important. But the story of the machine that made the change possible starts much earlier, in the 1st century AD, with Heron of Alexandria. Heron of Alexandria was a Greek engineer and mathematician, and thanks to his inventions, he is considered to be one of the most important scientists of antiquity. Heron was very curious about the power of steam. And experimenting with it, he invented the first machine that moved thanks to thermal energy. The one you see here. And he called it Areolipia. What a name! The Areolipia consists of a hollow sphere connected by two tubes to a container filled with water. A sort of covered pot. The container is heated, so the steam, which has nowhere to escape, rises through the pipes to the sphere. And from there, it comes out through some tubes. As the steam escapes, with a lot of force, the sphere spins. See? And you ask yourself, what is this for? At that point in time, nothing. Heron couldn't think of anything useful to do with the gadget. And although it caused a sensation at the time, it ended up becoming a child's toy. Can you imagine? Time went by, and several inventors tried to take advantage of this toy to give it a more practical use, although all of them without much success. Until the Scottish engineer called James Watt made some changes and turned it into the steam engine. But how does it work? Well, it's very easy, really. Look, it looks like magic, but it's something much, much better. It's science. Coal is poured into a boiler and a fire is built. The fire turns the water into steam. The steam rises through the pipes with a lot of force. So much force that it pushes this thing, which is called a piston, to one side to another, to one side and to the other. You see? When the pistons move, also moves the mechanism that pushes the wheel. This wheel is called a transmission wheel because it in turn turns other wheels. And with this mechanism, we can move almost anything. As you can see, great inventions, great changes don't happen from one day to the next. And quite often, they are not the work of just one person. To achieve any goal requires curiosity, study, effort, and imagination. Who would have thought the Heron of Alexandra's little toy would end up changing the world? Bye-bye, friends. See you the next time.
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
Hello friends and welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Take a look at this lifeline. As you can see, history is divided into 5 main stages. Today, we're going to learn all about the Ancient Age. The Ancient Age begins in 400 before Christ, when writing was created, and ends with the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 after Christ. During this period, the first civilizations emerged and developed. Mesopotamia being the first city-state, Egypt with its pharaohs and pyramids, Greece with its wise philosophers and the Olympics, and Rome with its strong gladiators and great empire. The main characteristics of the Ancient Age are the following. In ancient ages, urban life began to develop, causing cities to grow, and the number of inhabitants they had increased. In these cities, political power was in the hands of kings, emperors, and pharaohs. These positions were those with the highest authority. The population was divided into free men and slaves. The free men enjoyed many rights and owned the land and also the slaves. The slaves were usually prisoners of war or the children of slaves. They had no rights and always were made to do the hardest tasks. During the ancient age, wars were continuous, so the military were drilled on values, routine, and discipline, as well as perfecting their physical strength and aim. Trade between cities became more and more important and allowed for a great culture exchange between them. This was also when the first architectural wonders, such as the Egyptian pyramids, the theaters, and the Colosseums in Rome, where the fearsome gladiators fought, and the Greek religious and cultural centers, the Acropolis, and the Parthenon were built. The truth is that it is impressive to see what the men in the ancient ages have accomplished. At Happy Learning, we believe it is very important to know the past, to understand the present, and to improve the future. Above all, it is very important to know the mistakes of the past and learn from them so as not to make them again. Goodbye, friends! Until the next video!
Hello friends! Welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Have a look at these images. They're numbers. Numbers are used for many things, like to count, to measure, and also to play. Today, we are going to get to know some very old and very special numbers. Today, we're going to learn about Roman numerals. To understand the importance of Roman numerals, we'd have to take a trip to the past. Over 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire conquered many European countries. And these countries adopted their language, Latin, and also their numbers. Although over time, these numbers stopped being used. And the majority of countries started using Arabic numerals, which are what we use at present. Despite this, Roman numerals continue to be very important. For example, they are still used to tell the time on some clocks. To distinguish between kings, like the current King of Spain, Philip VI, with his ancestor, Philip V, or to number the centuries. You will have seen more than once that the 20th century is represented like this, or the 21st century like this. Well, now it's time to really learn the Roman numerals. Roman numerals are represented through 7 capital letters that we have to learn. The I represents number 1, the V number 5, the X is 10, the L 50, the C 100, the D 500, and the M represents the number 1000. Now let's repeat. The I 1, V 5, X 10, L 50, C 100, D 500, and M 1000. It's easy, right? Also, Roman numerals are really fun because to write them, we have to think about and understand some interesting rules. But we will learn about this in another video. Bye, friends!
Search us and subscribe to Happy Learning's YouTube channel.
Hello friends, welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Do you remember some very old and very special numbers which are still seen today on some clocks? Yes, you can. They are the Roman numerals. Well, today we're going to learn how to count them and how to form bigger numbers. Today, we're going to learn the rules of the Roman numerals. Do you remember Roman numerals? I is 1, V is 5, X is 10, L is 50, C is 100, D is 500, and M represent the number 1000. Very good, but how do you write the rest of the numbers? You're going to be amazed, but we only need these letters and 6 rules to form all the numbers we want. First rule, I, X, C, and M can be added up to 3 times. For example, to put a 3, we put the I once, twice, 3 times. Second rule, V, L, and D cannot be replaced because they already are the letters that represent their duplicate value. For example, putting a 10 like this is wrong. We already have the X, which is the number 10. Third rule, addition. If a Roman numeral is written to the right of a Roman numeral, then it is always added together. For example, if we have the X, which is 10, and to the right we have the V, which is 5, the 5 is smaller than 10, so we have to add them. 10 plus 5 equals 15. Very good. Fourth rule, subtraction. This is the exact opposite of the addition rule. When to the left of the Roman numeral there's a smaller one, it is subtracted. But be careful, we can only subtract a single symbol. For example, I, V would be 5 take away 1 equals 4 because the I is to the left and is smaller than the V. Sometimes we get confused with the rules of addition and subtraction, but let's take a look at an example to make it clearer. If we have this Roman numeral XI, it would mean the number 11, right? Because the I is less than the X and it is on the right side. That is, it is added. And what would happen if we placed it on the left of the X? Well, according to our rule, we'd have to subtract. 10 minus 1 equals 9. 11, 9. 11, 9. Can you see it? Well, here's the fifth rule. If between 2 digits there is one that is less than the other 2, it will subtract its value from the next one. That is, the one on the right. Let's see if you understand. Since the I is in between 2 numbers that are larger, we subtract the I from the X on the right. 10 minus 1 is equal to 9, and 10 plus 9 is equal to 19. That's it. Now for the 6th and last rule. The dash rule, the easiest of them all. When you find a Roman numeral with a dash over it, multiply it by 1,000. For example, if you see the number 9 with this little line above it, it is not 9, it is 9,000. It's not complicated at all, is it? Before we say goodbye, though, let's practice a number together, applying the rules we have just learnt. 97. Let's see, 97 can be formed by adding 90 to 7. How can we represent 90? 90 is 100 minus 10, isn't it? Well, we can use the C, which represents 100, and we can subtract the X, which is 10. To place them correctly, we remember the subtraction rule, which says that to subtract a smaller number, we place it to the left. So it would look like this. XC. Well, now we have 90. Next, we have to add 7. So we use the addition rule. And we place the numbers to the right of what we already have here. To add 7, we put the V, which is 5, and we add 2 with the letter I twice. Because the first rule told us that I, X, C, and M can be divided up to 3 times. Perfect! Let's put them in order then. X, C, V, I. Remember to put them on the right because we're adding. And that's it! 97 in Roman numerals. Roman numerals are a lot of fun, aren't they? They're like puzzles. If you practice the rules, you'll have a great time. Goodbye, friends. See you in the next video. Hello, friends. Welcome to a new Happy Learning video. Today, we're going to know the incredible story of a pharaoh, famous for her beauty and intelligence, who lived surrounded by pyramids and deserts. Do you know who she is? It's Cleopatra, the most important pharaoh of Egypt. Surely you have heard that Cleopatra was very beautiful and flirtatious. She bathed in donkey's milk to preserve her beauty. She also liked cats so much that when they died, she mummified them. Unbelievable! But do you think that's the reason she became one of the most important and famous women in the world? She achieved amazing things thanks to her studies and her intelligence. Let's get to know her more. Cleopatra was born in Alexandria, a city in Egypt during the ancient ages. Yes, that's right, in the one era after prehistory and before the Middle Ages. She was the daughter of the pharaoh Ptolemy. What a name! And from a very young age, she stood out because of her desire to learn. Her father wanted her to have the best education possible, and she had the wisest sages as teachers. Cleopatra, who was a very good student, learned philosophy, mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and music. She was also very curious and learned all the languages spoken in Egypt: Arabic, Latin, Hebrew, Ethiopian, and so on up to 9 languages. Learning languages is very important so you can talk to the whole world. When her father died, Cleopatra was only 18 years old, and she was the heir to the throne. But Egyptian tradition said that a woman could not rule Egypt without a man. So Cleopatra had to reign with her younger brother. Of course, how patriarchal. Long live equality. But her brother, who was not willing to share power, betrayed her and managed to expel her from Egypt. Cleopatra, to confront her brother, came up with a very clever plan. Hidden in a luxurious carpet, she presented herself to Julius Caesar himself, the Emperor of Rome, the most important man in the world. Can you imagine Julius Caesar's fright when he saw her coming out of the carpet? Cleopatra told him of her brother's betrayal, and the Roman emperor, impressed by her courage and cunning, not only helped her to recover Egypt, but also, fell madly in love with her. Cleopatra returned to rule Egypt, and she did so well that her beloved country grew, became richer, and regained all its splendor. The Egyptians were very happy with their pharaoh, but the Romans not so much, and began to see Egypt as a threat to their power. So, when Julius Caesar died, They were quick to send a fleet full of soldiers and their best general to force Cleopatra to submit to the power of the Rome. This general's name was Mark Antony, and he was very brave. Cleopatra knew that Egypt had no chance of winning if they went to war, so once again she thought of a cunning plan. She appeared before Mark Antony disguised as a real Egyptian goddess in a luxury golden boat and accompanied by dozens of servants. She wanted to impress him and convince him that, instead of fighting,